Well, good morning, everybody. As we watch the radar animation from last night into early this morning, this kind of reinforces where this pattern just has been for several days, in fact, a few weeks now. We have had a northwest flow in the jet stream just riding a temperature gradient right through this section of the country, and we've had multiple clipper systems that have come through as well. And we're just, again, here seeing the last two of these kind of sneaking through the country here, one out ahead of it coming out of Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. This morning it moved into parts of the Appalachian Mountains and over toward North Carolina, Virginia, and then the next system that's coming on the back side of this. Remember, all of this is being fed through parts of the Pacific Northwest, which have seen, as Matt pointed out yesterday, just tremendous amounts of rain and some very, very deep snows at high elevation. One last thing to point out as you watch the animation, it is interesting to note some of our drier areas here where the temperature inversions are well established. We can see last night the interference on the radar with the wind turbines. That's all those bright specks that you see there as you look through parts of the southern plains. Now, I do want to show you the latest that we have on the snow total reports for the last 72 hours. So I kind of took this and ran it out 72 hours just to kind of look at these previous two events. A lot of 6 to 10 inch snowfall amounts coming through here. Then some really big snows coming off the Great Lakes. A couple of places picking up over 15 inches. And then the second little clipper that snuck through right in there and dropped 3, 4, 5 inches of snow. A little bit higher as you got down here at parts where it pushed up against higher elevation. Again, one of my favorite websites just to get the individual reports out there from, part of this is fed by Kokoraz, which is a great program just to kind of give us more detail on our weather maps like this. Now, if we kind of keep, with the theme of the pattern doing that, right? We've talked about this extensively. I just want to look across the country who's not received this precipitation. And it's so much of the plains getting toward the Mid-South. And then, of course, California. We were so wet in the month of November. In fact, I heard that there was a lake bed, a dry lake bed here in Death Valley, which is about right there, that for the first time in a long time had some water. And I think it's called Lake Manly. I'll have to go back and look that up. But really important to see that. But overall, the pattern, last 7 days, it's been this. And I just want to show you again how much moisture is coming to the Pacific Northwest, specifically coastal Washington into the northern part of Oregon. We have had some locations here based off of radar estimates and rain gauge estimates that are over a foot of rain. And again, we saw the river levels with Matt's briefing the other day. One of the things I'm interested in, though, when I look at this particular map, all right, I've spent a lot of time in November and early December in Montana, just several great meetings out there. And as I kind of traveled the state, I would get wildly different reports on precipitation. And we can see this. Look at the effect of the rain shadow here versus getting farther into the interior, just in the last week alone, with much heavier precipitation, including some very good snow that we then briefly warmed up the other day, bringing in some rain into this area, but still better and better moisture. Now, that's just picking out one spot in the country to think about. But the reason I do that is because I love to show you these maps, right? It's one of my favorites. I show them every video, I feel like. And I want you to understand that when these are made at Iowa State, they are averaging the precipitation over an entire climate district. And some of the biggest climate reporting districts in the country are in Wyoming. Like, see the one with the number 1 in it here? You have to understand that it includes all of this, which has been extremely wet, and this region right in through here, which has been relatively dry. Now, thinking that through, it is important to note that even with the moisture that we've seen lately coming through this part of Washington, we're still not near the very top. What I mean by that is it has and can get even wetter than what you've seen here, and there's been a tremendous amount of flooding. But California, after being so wet in November, has gone over very dry. We've watched this region continue to get drier and drier, just getting missed by most of these systems, which again, several came through in this trajectory. We had the rains to the south of it as high pressure pushed and squeezed into this area in the last week or so. But in the middle, we've been very, very dry. All right. Now, Matt pointed out some information about snowpack in the west. Looked at the Colorado Basin. We have had some better snows getting into this area. But again, looking at snow information, in early December is not nearly as important as it is when we look at it in January, February, March. And we'll keep doing that in subsequent videos. But I wanted to come back to this issue we have here because I can take you to a spot that's right in through here. It's called Shoto. And as you look at it, we're like, wow, they're 400% or 500% of normal precipitation in that area. Yet, when you look at the actual data for that spot, they flatline on precipitation since October, right? So this is just one little corner of the world, where sometimes these maps, because of the way they're created, maybe don't convey the nuances to what's actually happened in certain pockets, especially areas where there's a lot of mountains. Now, you can still step back and look and say, over the last 2 weeks, man, we have avoided so much of the southwest southern plains and that corridor that I said that runs through the mid-south over the Ohio River Valley, which, yes, last night bringing in some moisture through here was good, but it's pretty easy to identify those spots that have been missed. Now, one thing to point out again, look at this flow. This is that northwest flow that we are anticipating some sort of shift around Christmas or before to go away. But I was watching early this morning at how cold the air is underneath these clouds streaming over the top, and you can start to see it emerge in Minnesota and Wisconsin last night, where we're getting surface temperatures that are as cold as some of the cloud top temperatures. Some of the very, very cold air, though, is going to be penetrating through this area in the next few days. One thing to take note of here, it doesn't show up so well in the infrared, but we're now in I think day 17 or 18 of the Thule fog, or the low-level cloud field that's been in California's central valley here. And I just went and grabbed a map just to kind of show you what this looks like. I know you've heard a lot about it, but it's just amazing just to watch it fill in this particular area. The temperature pattern is so inverted, and we're just trapping this layer right in through here of just very dense low-level cloud. And I think it'd be fun. I wish I could do this. I like to fly over the top of it and just see what it looks like, just kind of laying as like a boil over the top of this area, maybe with the way the clouds may look. But it's been quite cool underneath this. It's also important to note here on this satellite image from December 11th, the snow we have on the Sierra Nevada, the southern Sierra Nevada, the central Sierra Nevada, and not here in the north. See that? So this is why we watch these images just to see when and where we're putting down snow throughout the West this season. I think we've got a big change coming for California as we approach the week of Christmas. But until then, the question is going to be, how long does this last? I did go in and look. I picked up Fresno just to pick a city there, and you can see on the solar insolation graphic, in other words, how much of the sun's light's getting to the surface, how they've just dropped off so rapidly because of how often this fog or this low-level cloud has set up. But I do have some good news for you, California. And if we go to the National Weather Service 5 days, so I hit their API to give me the written forecast, and it's interesting. Patchy fog, look at them. Then you get down here to Monday, partly sunny. I imagine folks might just go out and have a good look up. Don't look at the sun, but just enjoy the fact that you might finally see some sunshine breaking through. And the question is, what's going on after this weekend that can start to remove that fog? And we got to talk about what that is, what it looks like, and where things are starting to break down. Okay, so here's your next 2 weeks. And I want to say this, the biggest changes I've seen have been along the West Coast. We've now seen the models attempt to deliver more moisture into California as a sizable ridge, which has lived in this area for the last 2 weeks, maybe longer than that, is expected to move. It's going to relocate. It's going to shove itself over here into this part of the Pacific. And as that occurs, there'll be a reflection of this ridge here in the central United States, which is still forecast to be very, very dry. So some of those areas I pointed out that are so dry lately, we do not see a major pickup in precipitation here. And earlier in the month, we were so concerned about the drought that was down or even last month too, down in the southeast. We had a little bit of rain that snuck through there, but we're expected to go back over dry again. And this map goes all the way out to December 26th. Now, I think there's big changes in the days leading up to Christmas. Matt and I have been alluding to it all week, and those changes have to do with this pattern. So now do you see what I'm talking about? The ridge breaks, the reflection shows up here, and the jet's going to want to do this. And what's interesting about this is for the last few weeks, what we've seen is the jet coming in and diving in through here. And what I think this could mean is we're going to take that temperature gradient we've talked so much about, we're going to move it north. And that's going to change a lot about this upcoming pattern and how it's going to set up. Now, you could see too that we're getting a bit blocky in the pattern. Matt mentioned it the other day, but there's a high over a low here, and there seems to be another omega type block setting up over parts of Europe as well. And I think that's going to be critical to understand what the stagnation of this pattern could mean toward precipitation and temperatures. So we're going to have to dig into this deep, and it's going to start with a look at the jet stream. Now, why California's been out of the flow for so long is we've been here, and we're here again today. But as Matt mentioned yesterday, look at this high over low already setting up. This is maybe the beginning of what is going to be this slow pattern shift that could happen here over the next 7 or 8 days and then become established by the time we get into the week of Christmas. I think it's going to be critical for temperatures and who's going to get wet and who's going to get dry and where that snow is going to be. All right, so this is our narrative, and we got to figure out a way to kind of draw this out. So the next 7 days, this is the newest update from the WPC. All right, yeah, we have another clipper. We're going to talk about that one coming through here soon. But there is a broad area that just continues to stay dry. Although we've now brought more of Northern California, which you saw a few moments ago was incredibly dry, they're going to be brought back more into the flow. But the question is going to be, are we ever going to get that flow to come into California and run across the country out of the south and west? We've discussed that at length. That's what I'm going to be concerned about, because if it doesn't, well, over the next 2 weeks, we're not expecting it to really do that effectively. Over the next 10 days, I should say. So up to the 22nd, this whole region and through here continues to stay very dry. And we see pockets of the southeast, which we've watched on the drought monitor get worse, stay dry as well. So yeah, there was some moisture that came through here lately, but it was short-lived. And as a result, we don't expect there to be much of a change overall in that drought risk package we had in this area. So again, this is the probability it's staying under 1/10 of an inch over the next 10 days. If we look at who's on the wetter side of this, here's our probabilities of going over an inch, okay? And again, a lot of this is going to be focused in the west, in the Pacific Northwest specifically, along with our Great Lake effect snow here, all right? Now, I really hope that we get this moisture into West Virginia and this part of Pennsylvania. It's been extremely dry in this part of the country throughout much of summer and now getting into fall and winter, and we need to see that moisture come through. But over the next 10 days, these probabilities now jumping up to 4 inches and 8 inches, this whole setup with the incredible flooding that is hitting the Northwest is not done. It's going to continue, and the risk remains quite high in that area. Okay, all hazards weather map here about 5:40 this morning. We have winter storm warnings that are out for parts of Montana. I'm concerned about the winds following this up after this weekend in Montana as well. So we've got that. We have this region again, our next little line of where some of the snow is going to come through. And you see the counties outlined in white. These are now under a cold weather advisory. And it's going to get colder and colder. And you saw it on the infrared a few moments ago. We still had this morning winter storm warning out for parts of southern Indiana, a section of Ohio, and then northern Kentucky. And that's where we're watching this system come through. Still the flood watches and flood warnings here throughout much of the Pacific Northwest, really into this part of Washington more than anything. And I just want to point out one last thing. We do have the frost freeze issue going on here in southern Georgia and northern Florida. All right, here it is. If we play the high-res NAM from this morning, okay, there's our snow coming through mid-morning this morning into Montana. And then we've got more of it. There it is. This is now getting overnight into Saturday morning. And here comes our next little clipper, okay? Out ahead of it, some snow through the Great Lakes. The clipper then stretches from South Dakota into Iowa, hits Illinois again. My mom is not very happy about this. She's going to have our big family Christmas. My mom's maiden name is South, so I would talk about the South family Christmas. Well, we're going over to Springfield for that. And I'm curious if my family's going to be able to get in, because we're kind of scattered throughout Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And we'll have to wait to see if that's going to be a go or not. I hope to see my family, but if weather is bad, I tell them to stay home. Anyway, that system by Saturday night is now pushing through Ohio, again hitting West Virginia, Pennsylvania, some lake effect on the backside. And while we got a short break in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to come back on pretty soon here with our next bit of onshore flow setting up by Sunday morning. What I do want to watch carefully is how much snow gets into parts of the mid-Atlantic, including New Jersey, New York, Boston. You can see the NAM is attempting to keep it cold enough for that to occur. And if we just take a quick look at the NAM's forecast of total snow. There we go. Yeah, so we've got another swath in through here of, I would call this another 2 to 5 inches based on the NAM. And then heavier snows in West Virginia. We're going to watch the East Coast very carefully late in the weekend. But in central Montana, look, you see what's going on with that rain shadow? Right here, just hitting this hard, but more snow in those same quarters. So Montana, you are divided by your microclimates with respect to wind and mountains. That's just it, all right? Okay, bigger picture. Let's just flip right over to the models that run out. We're going to take these out 10 days. I am so sorry, folks. Matt's been mentioning this. There has been an issue with the GFS showing rain where there's not rain. That was my fault. When I coded this up, I misinterpreted lately, as I was making some adjustments, the precipitation flags. I fixed it, so apologize for that. You're not going to see these weird greens mixed in with the blues when it's going to snow. But this was last night, getting in through the day today, now working into Saturday. So there's that clipper coming through. See it? And it just sneaks right through that same corridor. I'm going back and forth over the day on Saturday. See it? Right in the middle part of the country. That one moves east. We can see the snows in both models hitting, again, parts of the Mid-Atlantic into New Jersey, New York. Boston could get some snow out of this. And then we wait, because what we're going to be waiting on is a shift away from this massive Arctic high. It is in both models. It's a big one. And it's going to have clear skies, calm winds, and brutally cold temperatures. It's coming right through the country like that. Now, if you're sick of the cold weather, just wait. Just wait. We've been talking about this change in the pattern, the reorientation of the temperature pattern, and California is going to be the signal. You ready? This is next Monday when we start to finally see the two-leaf fog, or the low-level cloud, go. We've reoriented the jet, and we start to see better flow coming through, and it's going to be brief. Fresno, you might get that day of sunshine, but to the north, we're going to be seeing more moisture coming into Northern California. Now, with colder air, look at the snows coming to the Cascades, Northern Rockies. We then play it forward, and it seems out there about December 18th that we start to get the possibility of a system coming through. Now, take note, the European does not agree with the GFS. The European's got this system kind of running like this, and it's not quite there in the GFS. But we'll watch to see how the weekend model trends go. But that system could roll east, and then after it, we follow up with California, Northern California, Washington, Oregon, more storm systems. And that gets us all the way out to the solstice. Now, it's not a massive change, and a lot of the beginning of this pattern is the same stuck pattern we've been in, but that is something different to be watching here. Now, with that, you saw quite a bit of blue, so let's talk about some snow. We're going to use the European model first. As I play this out, here it gets us through Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Let's just take this out a full week in the model. We're going to park it right there at 168 hours. So again, there's your active corridor, right? See the increased amount of snow here. And if we want to do a quick comparison, that's the GFS. There's the Euro GFS. Kind of go back and forth between those two. I see a lot of similarities here. I'm pretty excited that there's something close. Here's the AI model. So again, still some similarities. And finally, the national blend. Now, if we come back to that Euro and just keep going, watch California. See, we're starting to bring more of this into this setup. The GFS, let's just keep taking it out. Look, Northern Sierra grabbing some snow. And I've got big questions about where this pattern goes right after Christmas. And one of the models that has flip-flopped the most is this guy, the GFS. I'm running the version 16 here. Okay, what's happening that's making all of that occur? Well, here's the jet stream pattern by the 20th. Now you're going, all right, well, tell me again. This ridge, which had been planted here, has shifted. See it? Why did it get to shift? Because we're blocking up the North Pacific. Now watch what this does. The 20th, 21st, 22nd, there you are. That is a trough that is now becoming established in the ensembles across the western states. And it is opening up for a pre-Christmas warm-up here, maybe a Christmas Day warm-up into the central U.S. We might put 50-degree temperatures way up toward I-80. In fact, some of the models yesterday, I was talking to a group in Champaign, Illinois, they went for, the GFS was at 67 in Champaign, Illinois on Christmas Day. Now, of course, that's way far out here, but the reality is the models kind of went over to something like this. And we're going to have to ask questions like, is this it? Is this what we're expecting? Now, you know, I've been waiting on this, right? How many times have I shown you in the last couple of weeks this? Like, okay, here was that extended trough that was over the Hudson Bay into the North Atlantic. And the ridge that was in the west. See it right there? See the ridge that was in the west? I'm sorry if you can't see it. This all lines up with the map at the bottom. And then I kept saying, hey, what's this? We are now starting to see some sort of troughing event setting up in the western United States. When? Starting around the 13th, 14th, 15th. What I'm curious about is, does this occur going toward the 18th? And does this ridge become established right around Christmas? Now you're going, what are you talking about? That is a ridge, okay, I'll put an H in it, sorry, right there, that lives here, okay, right around Christmas. Now the model is leaving it. It's just saying, yeah, leave it around all the way to the start of the new year and leave the trough in the west through the start of the new year. To be honest, if I could make this happen, there are reasons agriculturally that I want this to happen. It's not pleasant for anybody that's going to be listening, but there's reasons agriculturally that I want this to happen, and here they are. Western U.S. trough, let's bring the snowpack up in the Sierra Nevada. Let's cure this issue with worrying about snowpack there, the Central Rockies, the Northern Rockies. Let's get ourselves away from fearing a problem this winter with snowpack and therefore reservoir strength. Secondly, if a ridge develops in the midsection of the country where we have snow on the ground, this brings in warmer conditions. Warmer conditions melt snow. And because the ground underneath this isn't fully frozen yet, we could get some of that snow into the topsoil and start to revive soil moisture issues, which I've gone on and on about for weeks. So I'm a bit selfish here, but I'm okay with this. But I'm curious what this means in terms of that full temperature pattern. Week 2 forecast, though, look, the new CPC, the new Euro, the new artificial intelligence, and the new GFS are changing that up. Now, if you are watching me in the Central Plains where it's been so dry over toward the Mid-South, we're okay with this as well. Because what this could do is eventually kick out the ridge that's going to become established here and bring in some southwest flow. But I don't know that that's happening for us until we get into that probably post-Christmas week. That's really what we're looking at. As I was here, I glanced down and saw my wind map. I do want to blow that up and show you a couple of things here. Cumulative winds. I mentioned Montana needs to be looking out early next week. By Monday into Tuesday, watch into southern Alberta and Saskatchewan, northern Montana, how strong the winds are going to be. And they include parts of North Dakota in this as well. So we're still watching for some pretty ferocious wind gusts in this area. Now, that whole narrative I just gave you about the way the precipitation pattern can play out is going to really come down to what the temperatures are going to do. And what have we talked about, right? We've seen access to cold air in through here. We've seen a temperature gradient set up right in through there. Been very mild west. Much colder to the east. Now, the map starts not at the beginning of the month, but back on Thanksgiving, because that's really when we saw our first Arctic outbreak here. The next one's coming. Now, we had a really cold night that set up here. Temperatures dropped off. We're cool in the southeast, cool up the East Coast compared to yesterday, but this is a big change that's coming through, and I want to show you what these temperatures are up to. Because Friday mornings, the lows look like this. Watch this. There's Saturday, minus 19 in Grand Forks, Fargo. I mean, we've got some brutally cold air coming in. Now we get into Des Moines at minus 10, Quad Cities minus 10, Champaign minus 7. That is Sunday morning. And remember, snow is coming through this area on Saturday. Okay? We then get into Monday morning lows. Tuesday, they spread east. Very cold conditions here. Watch this massive warm-up taking shape, though. Now, that is something we got to talk about. Because as that warm-up gets established all the way out to the 18th, we now start to see these overnight lows. Look at this, flirting with freezing or above after a brutal Arctic air mass comes through. And the high temperatures, okay, watch the two-leaf fog go away. Ready? Here's Friday's highs, getting into Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, no, it's still there, right? But what do we say? Early next week. So very, very cold day on Sunday. Man, I got to tell my kids it's only going to get up to 4 on Sunday here. But then you see this, look, Monday and Tuesday. And look at this massive warm-up happening here. I mean, we're talking 40s in North Dakota. That's going to melt. Bringing this all back over warmer here is going to melt some snow. And I want to know what that snow melt is really going to look like when we start to see 70s regaining hold here. Now remember, this was well anticipated, this warm-up and the dryness. But as we break California down after this toward the solstice and just start to really invigorate that flow, it could give us a better look at the month of January. Now, I'm optimistic about it, but don't misinterpret my optimism at this point. I'm still very skeptical about this. But temperature-wise, there's your next 5 days. Arctic, massive Arctic air mass moving in through this area. Very mild west. Day 5 through 10, reorientation. See it? We were like this. Now we're like that. Day 10 through 15 does this. Now, what we want to watch is to see if we do regain a foothold of colder air in the west. And this big warm-up, it is dry, but it's a predecessor to better flow coming in this direction. That's what just typically happens. It would be huge for the Central Plains Mid-South if the warmest air was over the southeast. It'd be a problem in the southeast initially, but it would at least set things up to reorient the jet stream. And we got big questions about that, okay? Now, what I want to watch is this. This is early this morning snow depth. We've seen it several times here. Now watch. As we go through the weekend, you know it's going to be cold. That snow is going to be reinforced through that corridor. But I want you to watch the snow depth change once we get toward the warmer part of early next week. So you ready? Here comes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Look at this. Look at Montana. See the snow beginning to melt in Montana? Watch it go away in North Dakota. South Dakota by next Wednesday. And then with a big warm-up late next week, look at this. Now, I've got some okay news for folks. Now, let's get away from ag for a moment. This is a huge snowmobiling part of the world. Now, you can snowmobile a lot of places, but I still keep you under some snow here. So let's just keep an eye on that. But why I'm so concerned about this is if we could bring up the temperatures to melt some of the snow in Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, it is a mess. Some of you don't care. You don't want to see it. But for ag, melting that is absolutely key to soil moisture. So I'm going to watch this carefully. And then watch this. Get out there to December 22nd, 23rd. We might be able to melt quite a bit of the snow farther to the north. Now, this is terrible for ski resorts. Like I know some of my favorite ones are right here in Wisconsin. They're close. That's why I go to them. But farther to the north we go, we start to see this. Now watch. I know we're way out there in the forecast, but you looking at California? That is the reorientation of the jet going into the Christmas week. Holy smokes. Okay, now, please remember, we are way out in a single model run. But there are hints of this that I think I can explain away, okay? All right, beyond this, where are we going? MJO is no longer a predictor for me right now. It was when it was going 5, 6, 7, 8, and then dropped in through here. But this little pop out here, I do not think this is actually reflective of a move through MJO Phase 8. One of the big things is if we got into Phase 8 at the end of the year, that would reinforce the deeper trough here and put ridging along the west coast. We're just not doing that, which means this signal that we're getting is actually more from a full convectively coupled Kelvin wave that's advanced all the way across the planet through the tropics. And it's just not true. So we can't use this as a predictor, which means we're also going to see less reliability in this. This is the new forecast out there through mid-January looking at precipitation anomalies. And what I'm telling you is if we see an actual western U.S. trough, we will start to see better moisture through here and systems will come through. Now, how far to the east does the ridge move to open this whole corridor up to better precipitation is the question. And it's one right now that I see two massive failure modes on. The first failure mode would be that the trough does not fully become deep into California, instead hits here and runs a bit farther to the north. That would happen if this ridge just goes way off the rails, okay? But if it does stay in this area, you tend to get pretty highly amplified flow. And if that occurs, we're in good shape. The second failure mode is if we reestablish the big Hudson trough. Oh, then we go back to Clipper land, and it's very dry in through here. And I still think those are possibilities. This, by the way, is the mid-December, mid-January forecast from the GFS. Here is the European model over the same time period. All right, we just need to look at that. So what am I trying to tell you? I can't give you any confidence in a forecast for January right now. It's frustrating because we felt good about what was going to happen in December when we were talking back in November, and I've lost that signal. And I don't like it because you kind of feel like, well, wait a minute, I'm playing catch up with the pattern right now. But I'm going to take some time this weekend to start to work on this because this is the other big part. This is the today all the way through the 27th of December, and you know what this is if you watched our videos for the last several years. That's a surge again in the trade winds. That's a La Nina punch, okay? I think the Southern Oscillation Index, remember I said, well, it peaked and it's just been crashing, but what do we say? It's going to bounce for a while. I think it's about ready to bounce back up. Again, the Southern Oscillation Index, when it goes up, is an indication of La Nina. When it goes down, it's an indication of El Nino conditions. And if you look, Matt brought this up yesterday. I'm going to show you the full range of ocean temperature maps that Levi Cowan puts out here. He's one of my favorite meteorologists. Tropical Tidbits is his website. Matt showed you this graphic yesterday, but look up here. This is the one that compares it to historical averages. And our La Nina, look right down there. See, so it kind of was going down, down, down. We said, oh, it's coming up. But what did we say? It's going to do this for a while before it comes back up fully. And we might be going back down a little cooler phase. This is a little bit of an extra kick from La Nina. And here's the other failure point. If La Nina gets a hold of this pattern right after Christmas, you see where the ridge is going to be? Here and there. And we're back to Clipper Town again. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you about the way this pattern is shaping up beyond the next, let's call it honestly, beyond the next 10 days. My brain right now doesn't trust anything beyond 10 days as I've watched this MJO collapse event. So I'm sorry. We're just there, though, and I'm sure you understand. So I got one last thing to finish up with, and that is going to be we'll What's going on in South America? We saw some incredible rains move through southern and central Brazil earlier this week, and we're watching right now the next round along another front coming out of northern Argentina into Paraguay, into parts of like Paraná, Mato Grosso do Sul, and Santa Catarina. Now, what's important about this is if you watch where that precipitation is forecast in the European model, we're looking at like 100 to 150 millimeters of rainfall, so 4 to 6 inches of rain in this area. Notice where we're trying to stay drier. Rio Grande do Sul, for example. Is that going to fill in? Well, as we go farther out in time, let's just take it out a full week. Models keep a little section of this drier, but much heavier precipitation farther to the north. Now, I was at a meeting yesterday where they were talking about already seeing combines rolling, just a few, this is a fraction of a percent, but a few combines rolling in northern Mato Grosso on soybeans. So the question is, will we see this whole area go over and stay wet going forward? That's a concern of mine, knowing what history might say about this. And if it does get really, really wet in the next, let's call it 30 to 40 days, that's going to be a major delay on getting beans to fully mature and get out of the ground. Just something to watch. It's just speculative right now, but I wanted to bring it up. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I hope you have a great weekend. Be safe this weekend, especially if you're in that snow corridor running from Montana all the way to southern Indiana. And for the rest of us, be prepared for some really cold air in the Midwest, very mild air coming into the plains. And that's it. That's our story. Take care, everybody.